The city lights of Manhattan glowed like molten gold outside the tall restaurant windows, casting long reflections across the polished floor. It was the kind of place where powerful men signed million-dollar deals, where waiters moved like shadows, and where every whispered conversation mattered. No one expected the storm that was about to break open in the middle of that perfect night. Cole Miller walked in first, shoulders wide, chin lifted, wearing the confidence he used to wear only for his wife. Now it was reserved for the woman on his arm, Lana Hayes, dressed in a tight silver gown that shimmered with every step she took. Cole loved moments like this, arriving somewhere expensive, acting like he owned the air people breathed. He didn't just want success. He wanted to win. And tonight he believed he had. He handed his coat to the maitre d', already bragging about the game-changing deal he was about to lock down. Lana laughed loudly, making sure people looked. She always made sure they looked. Cole was smoothing his cuff when the noise around him shifted, just enough that his smile faltered. Conversations softened. Several heads lifted. Someone near the bar whispered, "No, that can't be her." Cole turned, and the world he controlled so tightly slipped right through his fingers. Because standing at the far end of the room, touched by the restaurant's warm amber light, was Grace Miller, his pregnant wife. The woman he'd pushed aside, dismissed, replaced. She wore a simple black wrap dress that framed her 6-month belly with quiet dignity. Her makeup was soft, her hair loosely curled, but it was her calmness that silenced the room. She wasn't shaking, she wasn't pleading, she wasn't broken. And she wasn't alone. Adrian Blake, Cole's oldest rival, the man he hated with a bone-deep fire, stood beside Grace, speaking to her in a low voice that made her laugh. Adrian's hand rested lightly on the back of her chair, a gesture so natural it made Cole's throat tighten. The maitre d' bowed to Adrian with respect Cole had never received. Cole felt Lana stiffen beside him. "Is that?" she whispered. "Yes," Cole breathed, but the words scraped his throat like metal. Because it wasn't just that Grace was here, or that she was glowing in a room full of people who once pitied her. It was the way Adrian looked at her, with a focus, a softness, a respect Cole had never learned to give. Investors who came to meet Cole began drifting toward Adrian's side of the room. A few glanced back at Cole with confusion, even disappointment. Cole's jaw clenched so hard he tasted blood. Grace lifted her eyes and met his. No fear, no pleading. Only a quiet strength that made his chest tighten with something dangerously close to panic. Cole took one step toward her, then another. The entire restaurant watched, and Grace slowly reached for her glass, her expression unreadable, as if preparing for something only she knew was coming. Something that would change the lives of everyone in that room. 6 months before the night, everything shattered. Grace Miller woke up to the soft hum of the city far below their condo. A glass-walled apartment high above Manhattan, the kind of place she once thought only lived in movie scenes. Morning light spilled across the white duvet, warming her cheeks as she blinked awake. Cole's side of the bed was already empty. He always left early these days, claiming he had critical meetings with investors. She tried not to think too hard about how often those meetings happened at night instead of morning. Her hand drifted to her belly, already rounding beneath her sleep shirt. The baby kicked softly, like a tiny reminder she wasn't alone, even when the bed felt colder than it should. She smiled and whispered, "Morning, little one," before pulling herself upright. She found Cole in the kitchen, wearing a tailored shirt, sipping coffee while scrolling through his phone. His expensive watch glinted under the recessed lights. He didn't look up when she walked in, not at first. It took a few seconds for him to glance over and smile the way he used to. "Morning, babe," he said, leaning in to kiss her forehead without noticing how tired she looked. There was a time when that small gesture made her feel cherished. Lately, it felt practiced, like something he did out of habit, not love. Still, she played her part. She always played her part. She opened her MacBook on the marble counter, going through financial reports for her remote analyst job, while Cole talked endlessly about the big waterfront development he wanted to win. "This is the one, Grace," he said with bright eyes. "If I land this deal, Adrian Blake can finally shut up. I'm tired of the press saying he's more polished." Grace nodded, even though she didn't like the way his voice hardened when he said Adrian's name. Competition brought out something sharp in Cole, something she had learned to tiptoe around. They had brunch reservations later at a sunny cafe in Soho. Cole insisted they keep up appearances, even though she secretly wished for a quiet morning at home. She changed into a soft blue maternity dress, smoothing it over her belly before they headed out. Cole snapped an iPhone photo of her at the elevator, captioning it, "My beautiful wife, glowing every day." People always commented how perfect they looked together. Only she knew the truth. She was exhausted, anxious, and alone more often than not. At brunch, friends showered her with attention, touching her belly, asking about nursery colors, talking about baby showers. Cole loved the spotlight, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against a water glass as he joked about becoming a girl dad or boy dad, depending on what deal closed first. Everyone laughed. Grace laughed too, even though something in her chest felt tight. When the group wandered into a boutique afterward, Cole drifted away to take a call, leaving her smiling politely while choosing baby clothes she wasn't sure they could afford. The boutique's gentle music made her baby shift again. She pressed a hand to her belly. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're okay." But an uneasy thought settled like a stone inside her. If everything was perfect, why did she feel so replaceable? Later that evening, she waited for Cole to join her for dinner, watching the skyline darken through the condo windows. He texted at 8 p.m., "Sorry, running late." Then again at 10 p.m., "Don't wait up." She fell asleep on the couch with the TV still glowing, one hand curled around her belly for comfort. She didn't know it yet. She didn't see the signs. But the life she thought she was building was already cracking, quietly, invisibly, beneath her feet. And one night soon, it would break wide open. The first crack appeared on an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind of night that should have been forgettable. Grace had just finished a late spreadsheet review, her MacBook humming softly on the kitchen counter. The condo was quiet, too quiet. She checked the time, 9:47 p.m. Cole still wasn't home, again. She tells herself not to worry, that big deals come with late hours. But as she rinsed her tea mug, something sharp tugged in her chest. She used to know Cole's schedule down to the hour. Now, there were gaps, empty spaces he didn't bother explaining. At 10:25, she heard the soft beep of the door code. Relief flooded her until he walked in. A faint, sweet perfume drifted in with him, unfamiliar and clinging to the fabric of his blazer. Not her perfume, not anything she owned, and definitely not something you'd pick up during a business meeting. She tried to ignore it, giving him a tired smile. "Late night?" "Investors," he said quickly, loosening his tie. "Big opportunity. Needed a face-to-face." He kissed her cheek. She nearly flinched, because the cologne she bought him last Christmas wasn't the scent she smelled. This was new. Floral, feminine. She wanted to ask. She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she touched her belly. "The baby was active tonight. I wish you'd been here." He mumbled something like, "Yeah, sure." Already drifting toward the bedroom, conversations with Cole were starting to feel like messages thrown into the ocean, never returning to her. Another crack came the following week. Grace reached into the laundry basket to gather Cole's shirts. When she lifted his white dress shirt, her breath caught. Light, shimmering makeup, highlighter maybe, was dusted across the collar. Not hers. She hadn't worn makeup in days, exhausted from pregnancy nausea. Her hands trembled as she held the shirt up to the light. The makeup shimmered like a quiet confession. She dropped the shirt back into the basket and pressed her palms to her eyes, whispering, "Don't jump to conclusions. Don't do this to yourself." But the ache in her chest deepened. That night, she brought it up in the softest voice she could manage. "Cole, your shirt had makeup on it. I just wanted to ask." He didn't even look up from his laptop. Probably hugged a coworker. You know how events are. "But, Grace," he sighed, "you've been so sensitive lately. It's the hormones." The way he dismissed her made something inside her wilt. She went quiet, folding into herself like it was safer that way. The worst crack came 2 weeks later. She woke at 2:13 a.m., thirsty. When she stepped into the hallway, light poured from the kitchen. Cole stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, voice low but urgent. "No, I told you, don't call this late." Pause. "Yes, tomorrow, same place." Another pause, softer. "I miss you too." Grace froze. The glass of water slipped in her hand, clinking against the counter. Cole spun around, eyes wide, then forced a smile too quickly. "Hey babe, couldn't sleep, investor on the West Coast." But his eyes gave him away, nervous, calculating, guilty. Her stomach twisted painfully. The baby shifted, reacting to her panic. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered, "I'm fine. Just going back to bed." She didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for him, smelling that same faint perfume on his clothes when he finally crawled into bed an hour later. The truth was forming, slowly, painfully, like a bruise spreading beneath the skin. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet, because admitting it would mean the life she'd built was already slipping through her fingers. And soon, she would no longer be able to stop what was coming. Grace met Lana Hayes on a crisp Monday morning, the kind of morning when Manhattan felt too bright, too sharp, like it was warning her without saying a word. Cole had insisted she stop by his office to see the new PR direction. He said it lightly, but there was a strange tension in his voice, something she couldn't quite place. She tried to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach as she walked through the marble lobby of Miller Urban Developments, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The receptionist smiled politely but not warmly. Grace had always sensed a shift in tone whenever she walked in, like she belonged in Cole's shadow, not in the building itself. Today that feeling was sharper. Then the elevator doors opened and Grace saw her. Lana. Tall, glossy-haired, dressed in a cream blazer that looked impossibly expensive. Her heels clicked softly across the polished floor, matching the confidence in her stride. She turned when she heard Cole say her name. "Grace, this is Lana Hayes, our new PR consultant," Cole announced with the kind of pride he used to reserve for Grace. Lana extended her hand immediately, smile bright, eyes wide with rehearsed warmth. "I've heard so much about you," she said, her voice smooth as satin. "Congratulations on the baby. You're glowing." Glowing. The word felt like a slap wrapped in silk. Grace shook her hand. Lana's grip was firm, almost possessive. A scent rose between them, sweet, floral, unmistakably the same lingering perfume Grace had smelled on Cole's blazer weeks ago. Her heart stuttered, but she didn't let it show. Cole moved closer to Lana than necessary, as he explained how she'd been revitalizing his public brand, working closely with him on press strategy, image building, high-profile networking. Every word felt like a knife twisting slowly. That was the part of his life Grace used to support, quietly, from behind the scenes. Now, she was being replaced in the one role she still had value in. Lana walked Grace through a new vision board, pointing out Cole's upcoming appearances, his signature style, his potential magazine features. Grace noticed how often Lana's arm brushed Cole's, how Cole didn't step away, how he seemed proud to be near her. At one point, Lana leaned in to whisper something in his ear, and Cole actually smiled, softly, intimately. Grace hadn't seen that smile in months. They thought she wasn't paying attention, but she saw everything. Later, Grace excused herself to the bathroom. She splashed cold water on her face, gripping the sink until her knuckles whitened. In the mirror, her eyes looked tired, too tired for her age. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I'm imagining things, maybe it's nothing." But the trembling in her hands said otherwise. When she stepped back into the hallway, she overheard voices, Cole and Lana, talking near the glass conference room. "She's sweet," Lana said softly, "but she seems overwhelmed. Maybe you should keep her resting at home. Too much stress isn't good for your public image right now." Grace froze. Cole lowered his voice. "I know. I've been thinking the same. She's been emotional lately." Emotional. Hormonal. Too much. Like she was a burden. Grace stepped back before they could see her. She pressed a shaking hand over her belly, whispering, "I'm right here, and he's acting like I'm already gone." When Cole finally called her name and walked her toward the elevator, Lana stood behind him, offering a gentle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It was lovely meeting you, Grace." Grace forced a smile back. "You too." The elevator doors slid shut, leaving Grace alone with her thoughts, the floral scent of Lana's perfume clinging to her like a cruel reminder. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Cole wasn't drifting away. He was moving toward someone else, and soon he would stop pretending altogether. The night of the gala at the Plaza Hotel was supposed to be one of Grace's happiest nights. Cole had insisted she attend, saying it was important for the brand that the world saw them together. For a brief, fragile moment, she let herself hope he meant it. She spent the afternoon getting ready, slipping into a navy maternity gown Hannah mailed from Ohio, a dress that hugged her belly with simple elegance. She curled her hair softly, added a touch of lip color, and looked in the mirror, trying to remember the last time she felt beautiful. The driver dropped them at the entrance, where camera flashes glittered like stars bouncing off polished marble. Cole straightened his suit jacket, barely glancing at her. "Smile," he said. "Investors will be here." Grace linked her arm through his, willing herself to stay calm. She wanted to believe this night could fix something. She wanted to believe the last few weeks had been misunderstandings. But when they stepped into the chandelier-filled ballroom, all that hope collapsed. Heads turned, subtle at first, then sharper, like people were whispering just a little too loudly. Grace noticed the sideways glances, the tight smiles, the pity. Then she saw why. At the center of the room stood Lana Hayes, not in a work outfit, not in a blazer, but in a breathtaking red gown that shimmered under the golden lights, the kind of dress that screamed confidence, ownership, arrival. She looked like she belonged there. And worse, she looked like she believed she belonged next to Cole. As if summoned by Grace's worst fear, Cole guided her toward the main circle of donors. Grace tried to walk steadily, but every step felt heavier than the last. "Cole! Over here!" one investor called. He stepped forward eagerly, and Lana slid right beside him. Grace blinked, confused. Why is she? Before she could ask, Lana placed a manicured hand on Cole's arm and said loudly enough for the crowd to hear, "We've finalized the PR strategy for the waterfront project. Cole and I have been working non-stop." Grace's stomach twisted. Working non-stop, working late, working together. And Cole didn't correct her. He smiled, proudly. A photographer approached. "Cole, can we get a shot of you and your partner?" Grace stepped forward instinctively, but Lana moved faster. She positioned herself beside Cole, touching his chest lightly. Too casually, too intimately. The photographer lifted his camera. Grace froze. Cole didn't move her way. He didn't introduce her. He didn't even look at her. He let the photographer capture a picture of him and Lana, him and another woman, while his 6-month pregnant wife stood 3 feet away feeling like air. The crowd murmured, whispered. Some turned away awkwardly, unable to watch. Grace's throat tightened. She forced herself to breathe. When Cole finally walked back to her, he said in a low hiss, "Don't make that face. You're stressing people out." "Stressing," she whispered, stunned. "You let her, Cole. She stood next to you like—" "That's her job," he snapped. "Don't start. Not here." Lana approached then with a smile dripping false sympathy. "Grace, dear, are you all right? You look overwhelmed. Big events can be so much when you're pregnant." Several people glanced over. Grace's cheeks burned. Cole leaned in and whispered sharply, "Go sit for a bit. You're making things awkward." He guided her, steered her, away from the central circle toward an empty table near the edge of the ballroom. She sat quietly, her hands trembling around a glass of water as she watched him return to Lana's side. Lana laughed at something he said. Cole smiled back. They looked like a couple. A real one. And everyone else saw it too. Grace swallowed hard, her heart cracking with a quiet, devastating truth. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Cole wasn't hiding Lana. He was showing her off. And Grace was being pushed out of her own marriage. Publicly, humiliatingly, with no way to stop it. The drive home from the plaza felt colder than the December wind outside. Grace sat in the passenger seat of the black Mercedes, one hand resting over her belly, the other gripping the edge of her gown to keep from shaking. Streetlights passed in long, golden streaks across the windows. Cole's jaw was locked tight, his hands gripping the wheel so hard the leather creaked beneath his fingers. She waited for him to speak. He didn't. Finally, she whispered, "Cole, why did you let her stand next to you like that in front of everyone?" He exhaled sharply through his nose. "Not this again." "Not this, Cole. I'm your wife." "And she's my PR," he snapped. "It was a photo. You're overreacting." The word sliced through her. Overreacting. He'd used it so many times lately it sounded rehearsed. Grace steadied her voice. "She acted like you two were." "Don't say it," he snapped again, louder. "You embarrassed me tonight. You kept glaring, making people uncomfortable. Do you have any idea how fragile investor relationships are?" Her eyes stung. "I wasn't glaring. I was hurt." "Hurt?" He laughed without humor. Grace, I am building something bigger than both of us, but I don't have time to manage your emotions every time someone compliments me or touches my arm or... Touches your arm? She repeated quietly. Cole, she's not just touching your arm. He didn't answer, because silence was easier than lying. Grace turned her face toward the window, watching the blur of city lights. Her throat tightened as she whispered, I needed you tonight. I really needed you. Something inside Cole hardened. And I needed you not to make a scene. I didn't. Yes, you did, he cut her off. You looked miserable from the moment we walked in. People noticed. They were whispering. They were whispering because you stood next to her like she was your wife. He slammed his hand against the wheel. Grace flinched. Enough, he said through clenched teeth. I can't keep doing this. Every day it's something new with you. The tears, the questions, the suspicion. I'm exhausted. Grace's voice cracked. Cole, I'm pregnant. I'm scared. I'm trying. You're failing, he said coldly, and you're dragging me down with you. She felt the words hit like a physical blow, dragging him down, failing, exhausting her. The woman carrying his child. By the time they pulled into the condo garage, she couldn't feel her hands anymore. Her heart was beating too fast, her breath too shallow. Cole got out first, slamming the car door hard enough for the sound to echo. Inside the condo, the argument exploded. Grace tried to talk. Cole tried to control. Their voices clashed like breaking glass. You acted like she's your date, Grace said, wiping her cheeks. She's part of my future, Cole shot back. She gets it. She understands the level I'm trying to reach. Grace stared at him. Are you saying I don't belong in your future? He didn't respond. And sometimes silence is the cruelest answer. When he finally spoke again, his voice was cold, clinical, empty of love. I think we should take a break until the baby comes. Grace blinked. A break? You need rest, stability. This, he motioned around wildly, isn't healthy for either of us. You can stay with your sister or find a quieter place. I'll cover a few months' expense, but I need space. Space, he was asking her, no, pushing her to leave their home. Cole, don't do this, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please, not now. This is what's best, he said, grabbing his jacket. For who? She whispered, for everyone. He walked away, leaving her in the middle of the living room, pregnant, shaking, alone. Grace pressed both hands over her belly as tears streamed down her face. I'm here, she whispered to the baby. I won't let us fall apart. But her voice broke, because deep down she felt the truth settling in. Cole hadn't just embarrassed her. He hadn't just drifted away. Tonight, he had replaced her. And soon, he would force her out of his life completely. Grace moved out on a gray Monday morning, the kind of morning where the sky looked tired and heavy, as if it already knew what she was about to face. Cole didn't help pack. He didn't even come downstairs. He sent a transfer to her phone and a short text that read, Take care of yourself. I'll check in later. He never did. A driver dropped her in front of a narrow walk-up in Queens, the cheapest short-term apartment she could secure on such short notice. The building was old, the kind of place with creaky stairs and neighbors who shuffled down the hallway in slippers at noon. A far cry from the marble lobby and doorman she'd grown used to in Manhattan. She stepped inside the apartment, the smell of old carpet greeting her immediately. The living room was barely big enough for a couch and a TV stand. The kitchen had a humming fridge and cabinets painted over so many times the wood grain had disappeared. She swallowed hard. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Hannah flew in the next morning, storming through the door with a duffel bag and fierce, protective eyes. Where is he? She demanded. Where is that man? Because if he thinks he can throw my pregnant sister into... Hannah, stop, Grace whispered. I don't have the energy. Something in her voice shut Hannah up immediately. She just hugged her, long and tight, hand resting over Grace's belly. You're not doing this alone, she said. Not ever. For a few days, having Hannah around made things bearable. They unpacked boxes, folded baby clothes, tried laughing about the bad paint job and the crooked cabinet doors. But Grace could feel herself shrinking under the weight of everything. Her marriage collapsing, her finances dwindling, her future uncertain. On the third day, Hannah opened the fridge and frowned. Grace, you barely have anything in here. Grace shrugged lightly. I'm trying to stretch what I have until I get more contract hours. Hannah's voice softened. Did Cole freeze the joint account? Grace didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was enough. One night, after Hannah returned to Ohio, Grace stood in the tiny kitchen heating a can of soup when a knock came at the door. She opened it to find her neighbor, Tasha, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes but a warm smile, holding a paper cup of hot coffee. "You looked pale yesterday," Tasha said simply. "Figured you could use something warm." Grace blinked. No one outside her family had offered her anything in weeks. She stepped aside. "Thanks, I'm still getting used to this place." Tasha glanced around the sparse room. "It's not fancy, but the people are good, and you're safe here. That matters." Grace nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. She didn't want to cry in front of a stranger, but her chest felt too heavy to hold it all in. "Rough patch?" Tasha asked quietly. Grace let out a shaky breath. "My husband asked me to leave." Tasha's jaw tightened. Men do stupid things when they think no one's watching, but don't count yourself out. Queens is where a lot of people start rebuilding. Rebuilding. The word felt impossible, but hopeful. Later that night, Grace lay in bed listening to the distant rumble of the subway. The apartment was dark, except for the small lamp she left on in the corner. She placed both hands over her belly, feeling the baby shift gently. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I'm trying so hard." A soft kick responded, like reassurance. But as she stared at the cracked ceiling, she felt the fear rising again. What if she couldn't afford childcare? What if her health got worse? What if Cole changed his mind and tried to take the baby? And what if... Her phone buzzed. A message from Cole. Her heart leapt before she read it. "Send me an update when you can. I'm in meetings. Don't make things complicated." Complicated. Like her pregnancy. Like her existence. Like her pain. She closed her eyes, breathing through the ache. Her world had collapsed in a matter of weeks. But she had no idea that soon another blow was coming, one that would push her even closer to the edge. And this time, she wouldn't have anyone to catch her. The first heavy snow of the season arrived the night Grace's body finally gave out. It began as a dull pressure behind her eyes, the kind she tried to ignore while finishing a late financial report at her tiny kitchen table. She'd been pushing herself too hard, too little sleep, too many skipped meals, too much stress. By midnight, the pressure had turned into pounding pain. Her vision blurred. Her chest tightened. She stood to get water, but her legs wobbled beneath her and the room tilted dangerously. She grabbed the counter, breathing heavily. "Not now," she whispered. "Please? Not now." But the next moment, her knees buckled. Only the sharp gasp of a stranger kept her conscious. "Bam. Hey, are you okay?" A man on the subway platform rushed to her side. Grace blinked at the tiled walls, confused. She didn't even remember getting there. She must have wandered out of the apartment in a haze, trying to get to a clinic she couldn't afford. Her vision dimmed again. Call the hospital," she managed before darkness overtook her. She woke to the rhythmic beep of hospital monitors and the sterile smell of disinfectant. A nurse leaned over her gently. "Grace Miller? You fainted. You were dangerously dehydrated and your blood pressure was elevated. With your pregnancy, that's not something we can ignore." Grace swallowed, her throat dry. "Is my baby okay?" "For now, yes," the nurse said, "but you need rest, nutrition, and less stress. Do you have a support system, family, a partner?" Grace hesitated. "My sister is out of state. My husband..." Her voice cracked. "He's busy." The nurse gave her a sympathetic look, the kind that told Grace this wasn't the first time she'd seen a woman abandoned when she needed someone most. After running more tests, the nurse placed a warm blanket over her and said, "You should call someone to pick you up when you're discharged. You shouldn't be alone tonight." Alone. It echoed through Grace's mind like a cruel reminder. She stared at her phone for a long time before pressing Cole's name. Her hand trembled as it rang, once, twice, 3 times. He finally answered, voice muffled by loud music and laughter. "What is it?" "I'm at a thing." A thing. She could hear clinking glasses, upbeat music, voices coated in champagne. She felt small just listening to it. "Cole, I fainted," she said softly. "I'm at the hospital. They said my blood pressure." "Oh my God, Grace," he groaned, irritated, not worried. "We've talked about this. You can't call me every time you feel a little off." "A little off?" Her voice cracked. "They said it was dangerous. I could have. Cole, I needed you." He sighed loudly, like she was interrupting his evening. "Look, I wired you money the other day. You have resources. I can't drop everything right now. I'm in the middle of an important meeting." "Are you with Lana?" she asked before she could stop herself. Silence, silence. And then soft laughter in the background. Lana's laughter. Grace felt the tears coming, hot and fast. "Cole, please, I'm scared." "You're being dramatic again," he snapped. "You always get like this. I can't handle your emotions on top of the deal I'm trying to close. Call your sister or get a cab. I'll talk to you tomorrow." The line went dead. Grace stared at her phone until the screen dimmed. She pressed a hand over her belly. The baby shifted, as if responding to her heartbreak. Hours later, a nurse wheeled her to the lobby. Snow fell heavily outside, coating the sidewalk in white. Grace wrapped her coat tight around her belly and stepped into the cold air. No one was waiting. No warm arms, no worried voice, just her. She whispered to her baby, "I'm sorry, I'm trying." A gust of icy wind hit her, carrying the distant echo of a city that didn't care she was struggling. But the universe wasn't done testing her. Because this health scare, terrifying as it was, wouldn't be the last. And the next blow would hit even harder, from a place she least expected. The morning after her hospital scare, Grace woke in her small Queens apartment feeling hollow, as if her body had been scraped clean from the inside. Snow still clung to the windows, turning the world outside into a quiet, unforgiving blur. She sat at the edge of her bed, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding her phone. Cole hadn't texted, not a single message asking if she made it home alive. She scrolled through their old photos. Smiles in Central Park, date nights in Soho, his hand on her belly during their first ultrasound. She used to believe those moments were proof of love. Now they felt like fragments of a story she imagined alone. Her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped, only to sink again. It wasn't Cole. It was her landlord reminding her that rent was due in a week. Grace exhaled shakily. She couldn't fall apart. Not now. She opened her laptop to check the small freelance job she'd taken for additional income, only to find an email waiting for her. "We are letting some contractors go due to restructuring. Thank you for your work." Another door closing. Her chest tightened. She closed her eyes, whispering, "What do I do now?" She didn't want to call Hannah again. Her sister had already offered to fly back, but Grace insisted she stay with her kids. She needed to stand on her own feet, somehow. By noon, she forced herself outside. The snow had turned into slush, and her boots splashed through puddles as she walked to a small cafe. She ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a tea, and sat quietly in a corner, trying not to cry in public. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a recruiter she'd forgotten she applied to weeks ago. "We have a short-term financial modeling position available. High pay, remote. Are you still open?" Grace blinked. She typed back quickly, hands trembling. "Yes, absolutely." Minutes later, she received the NDA. She scrolled through the document and froze. Client, Blake & Co. Holdings. Adrian Blake, Cole's biggest rival. The man Cole despised more than anyone else in Manhattan. Her heart pounded. Working for Adrian could mean trouble. If Cole found out, he would explode. He would blame her, twist the story, maybe even threaten custody later. But then she looked at the empty teacup in front of her, the hospital bracelet still in her coat pocket, and the apartment key that felt heavier every day. Fear wouldn't pay rent. Fear wouldn't feed her baby. Fear wouldn't rebuild her life. She signed the NDA. That evening, her first virtual meeting was scheduled. She sat at her tiny table, adjusting the camera, hoping the tiredness in her face didn't show. When the video connected, her breath caught. Adrian Blake appeared on the screen, sharp suit, calm eyes, the Manhattan skyline behind him. He didn't carry the arrogance people often whispered about. Instead, he looked composed, measured. "Grace Miller," he said with a polite nod. "Thank you for taking this on short notice." His voice was steady, professional. Nothing like Cole's cold dismissiveness. Nothing like the condescending tone she'd grown used to. Grace cleared her throat. "Thank you for the opportunity." Adrian glanced at her profile, then at the baby bump visible even through the camera frame. "I appreciate your time, especially considering your circumstances." She tensed, ready for judgment, but he continued gently, "If you need adjustments with deadlines, let me know. Your health comes first." Grace blinked. No one, not even her husband, had said anything like that in months. As they reviewed financial models, something unexpected happened. Her mind woke up. Numbers she once handled with ease flowed smoothly again. For the first time in a long time, she felt capable. Not burdensome, not too emotional, not invisible. When the call ended, Adrian said, "You brought clarity to a structure my own team missed." Impressive. Warmth bloomed in her chest, small but real. After she closed her laptop, she placed a hand on her belly and whispered, "Maybe. Maybe we're not done yet." She didn't know it yet, but this small consulting job, this tiny crack of opportunity, would soon pull her into the center of a storm much bigger than anything Cole had ever imagined. And the next twist would change the entire battlefield. Grace had forgotten how good it felt to be needed for her mind. Not her patience, not her silence, not her ability to keep the house peaceful. Her mind. For the first time in months, she woke the next morning with purpose instead of dread. The cold Queen's apartment felt a little less suffocating as she opened her laptop, wrapped herself in a blanket, and began working through the financial models Adrian's team had uploaded overnight. The numbers were messy, the projections were bloated. Someone on Adrian's staff had either rushed through the details or didn't understand the deeper risks. Grace leaned closer, her fingers dancing across the keyboard, making notes, reorganizing pivot tables, tightening formulas. She was rusty, but the rhythm came back to her like muscle memory. Every once in a while, the baby kicked, almost as if cheering her on. Around noon, a message popped up. "Joining Zoom in 2 minutes. Need to review your notes." Adrian Grace quickly tied her hair back, hoping she looked more awake than she felt. When the call connected, Adrian appeared again, calm, focused, the skyline glowing behind him like he lived inside a financial magazine cover. He didn't start with small talk. "Grace," he said, "your breakdown of the cost structure was exceptional. You flagged risks no one else saw." Her cheeks warmed. "I just noticed the inconsistencies. They didn't add up." "That's exactly why it mattered," Adrian replied. Something about the way he said it, not flattering, not exaggerated, just honest, sent a quiet shock through her chest. Cole never spoke to her like this. Cole praised himself, not her. Cole joked about her being too detail-oriented, as if it were a flaw. But Adrian valued it. When the call ended, Grace stepped away from the table and leaned against the counter, breathing in slowly. She hadn't realized how starved she was for basic respect. Later that afternoon, she discovered something even bigger. As she combed through bidding documents, she found a hidden clause buried deep in the competitor's proposal. A clause that would have exposed the entire project to massive overruns. Anyone not paying attention would have missed it. Her pulse quickened. She drafted a full breakdown, attached screenshots, and sent it to Adrian with the subject line, "Potential critical risk needs immediate review." Minutes later, her phone rang. "Adrian?" She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" "Grace," he said, voice sharper than before, "you may have just saved us millions. That clause could have destroyed our entire bid." She gripped the edge of the counter. "I'm glad I caught it." "You didn't just catch it," he corrected. "You dissected it. No one on my internal team flagged this. Not one person." A pause. Then softly, "I'm grateful you're working with us." No one had said they were grateful for her in a very long time. After they hung up, Grace sat on the couch, wrapping both hands around her belly. For the first time since being pushed out of her own marriage, she felt a spark inside her. Something bright, something alive. Maybe she wasn't broken. Maybe she wasn't failing. Maybe she hadn't been the problem all along. That night, she heated leftover soup and opened her email again. Another message from Adrian awaited her. "Your insight today prevented a bad decision. We'll credit you in tomorrow's internal meeting. And when this project is over, dinner is on me." Dinner. Her breath caught, not from romance, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being appreciated. She typed back, "Thank you, but you don't have to do that." Seconds later, his response arrived. "I know. That's why it matters." Grace placed her phone down slowly. Someone finally saw her worth. Not as a wife, not as a burden, but as a woman who had something powerful to offer. She didn't know it yet, but this new confidence, this rediscovered strength, was about to put her on a collision course with Cole's entire world. And soon, her quiet comeback would spark a war no one saw coming. While Grace was rebuilding her strength in that cramped Queen's apartment, Lana Hayes was tightening her grip on every part of Cole's world. His company, his image, his time, and most dangerously, his mind. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It unfolded in quiet, strategic moves. the kind only a woman skilled in manipulation could execute with a smile that fooled everyone but the ones paying attention. And Grace wasn't there to see any of it. But the city was. And it remembered. The first sign came when Lana moved into Cole's penthouse. Not officially, not in a way he could later deny, but in the form of little things taking over. A row of her skincare lined the marble bathroom counter. Her perfume sat beside his cologne on the dresser. A silk robe hung from the back of the bedroom door. She left her mark, the way ivy crawls up a wall, quiet, patient, and impossible to ignore once settled. At board meetings, she positioned herself subtly behind him, whispering suggestions into his ear before he spoke. At networking events, she introduced him to influencers and investors like she was the one molding him into a higher version of himself. Cole is evolving, she'd say with a soft laugh. He just needed the right direction. Behind every closed door, she fed him a crafted narrative. Grace doesn't understand you. Grace is insecure. Grace is dragging down your brand. You deserve someone who elevates you. Someone like her. And Cole, already inflated by ego and desperate for validation, drank it in like oxygen. The second sign came when Lana convinced him to upgrade his life. New suits, sharper cuts, expensive accessories, more frequent dinners at luxury hotels, exclusive events attended by people who only spoke in deals and status. You're meant to be seen, Lana purred, not hidden in domestic drama. Domestic drama. That was what she called Grace's pregnancy. She even pushed Cole to buy a new Mercedes, saying the old one didn't match his level anymore. Cole obeyed like a man starved for approval. And soon, everything Grace once shared with him, small joys, private routines, midnight talks, was replaced with a glossier, emptier world that Lana controlled piece by piece. The third sign came as whispers. Staff members noticed Lana walking into Cole's office without knocking. She took calls at his desk. She removed Grace's framed ultrasound picture and replaced it with a sleek sculpture to match the new aesthetic. When one assistant quietly tried to put the photo back, Lana fired her the same afternoon. The energy wasn't right, Lana told HR with a shrug. Only the cleaning staff saw the ultrasound photo later, tucked behind a stack of unused marketing binders like a secret someone hoped would disappear. Meanwhile, Grace spent her nights working, clutching her belly through waves of exhaustion, unaware that Cole and Lana were reshaping the narrative of her life in private parties and corporate halls. At one high-profile function, someone asked about Grace. Cole laughed, glass of champagne in hand. Grace is resting. She's too emotional for this environment. Lana placed her hand on his arm. He's been under so much pressure. I'm just helping him stay focused. People nodded in sympathy, toward them, not Grace. Soon, the city's elite circles believed a version of the truth that Lana crafted. Grace was unstable. Grace couldn't handle the pressure. Grace was a burden. And Lana, she was the future. But the fourth sign, the biggest, was the one no one expected. Lana began accompanying Cole to high-level strategy sessions the board never approved her for. She whispered ideas that weren't hers and took credit for insights she barely understood. And Cole let her. He didn't realize she was building influence not just around him, but over him. She wanted more than a title, more than attention, more than his affection. She wanted control. And Cole, blindly believing he was the one in power, didn't see the subtle strings forming around his wrists. But Grace's re-entry into the corporate world, her growing connection to Adrian, and her quiet rise in strength were about to collide violently with Lana's ambitions. And the woman Cole thought he'd replaced so easily was about to become the biggest threat to the empire he thought he controlled. Queens didn't sparkle the way Manhattan did. There were no glass towers, no rooftop bars, no marble lobbies or valet lines of luxury sedans. But in its own unassuming way, the neighborhood had a heartbeat, one Grace hadn't felt in a long time. It surprised her. It surprised her how gentle life could feel when the pressure of perfection was gone. Her mornings started with the muffled sound of kids running down the hallway, neighbors arguing softly about whose turn it was to buy cereal, and the scent of someone brewing cheap coffee. She'd sit at her tiny kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, belly resting comfortably against the edge, letting herself breathe for the first time in months. She still missed the life she thought she had. But she no longer missed the version of Cole she'd been clinging to. Tasha dropped by often, knocking once before letting herself in with a cheerful, "You alive in there, Mama?" She always brought something. A sandwich, extra fruit, a used baby blanket, whatever she could afford. One afternoon, she arrived with a second-hand rocking chair strapped awkwardly to a dolly. "Found this behind the shop," she said proudly. "Still rocks. That's all that matters." Grace laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. "You didn't have to. Stop. You need it. Baby needs it. End of story." They set it near the window, where the afternoon light poured through the faded curtains. Grace lowered herself into the chair, feeling it glide back and forth with a soft creak. Something inside her unclenched. For a moment she wasn't a wife abandoned. She wasn't a woman fighting for survival. She was just a mother preparing for her child. She also attended a community prenatal class at the local center. The room was plain, the floors old linoleum, but the women were kind and real, unfiltered by money or image. Some arrived with toddlers in tow, some alone, some with partners who looked more nervous than they did. Grace fit right in. During one session, a nurse handed everyone small journals for tracking emotions and baby movements. Grace opened hers that night, writing shakily, "I was afraid my world ended, but maybe it's beginning again." She didn't know why the words made her cry, but they did. Work with Adrian kept her grounded too. She'd finish her consulting calls, often propping her laptop on a pile of pillows when her back hurt, and sip warm tea while reviewing spreadsheets. The numbers made sense even when her life didn't, and that consistency steadied her. Adrian noticed. One evening after a call, he paused before ending the meeting. "Grace, do you ever take time for yourself?" She laughed softly. "Not really." "You should," he said gently. "You're carrying more than just a workload." Grace looked down at her belly. "I know. If you need an assistant to help with anything, personal or professional, let me know. You're important to this project." Important. Not tolerated. Not burdensome. Important. Those words warmed her long after the meeting ended. That night, after dinner, she curled up on her thrift store couch with a blanket and opened an ebook she'd downloaded during a free promotion. Atomic Habits. She highlighted a line that hit her hard. "Small improvements compound into remarkable change." She whispered, "I hope so." Her baby kicked as if agreeing. Grace rested her hand there and smiled. Not the forced smile she had worn for years, but a tender one. Private and real. The apartment wasn't luxury. The walls were thin. The heater rattled. The paint peeled near the bathroom ceiling. But for the first time in months, she felt a strange, precious thing. Hope. But hope is fragile. And just as Grace began stitching together a quiet, steady life, a storm gathered outside her small circle of peace. A storm carrying Cole's name. And it would strike harder than anything she had survived so far. Grace never expected her baby shower to be fancy, not after everything she'd lost. But she didn't expect it to sting either. Hannah insisted on planning a small gathering, even from Ohio, and coordinated it over video chat. Tasha brought balloons from the dollar store, a small cake from the bakery where she worked part-time, and a handful of neighbors crowded into Grace's tiny living room with warm smiles and hand-me-down gifts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was genuine. And for a moment, Grace felt safe. They played silly games, guessing baby names, measuring her belly with ribbon, passing around little onesies. The laughter felt light, almost healing. Every so often the baby kicked, making everyone coo and cheer. Grace wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of people who owed her nothing. "Cole will be here, right?" one neighbor asked innocently. The room quieted. Hannah's jaw tightened. Grace forced a smile. "He said he'd try." Try, the most useless promise he'd ever mastered. They moved on quickly, not wanting to ruin the mood. Someone handed Grace a soft-knitted blanket, another offered tiny socks. She felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. When it was time for the last game, Tasha dimmed the lights and lit a small candle on the cake. "For wishes," she said simply. "Every mama gets one." Grace closed her eyes. "I wish for peace, for strength, for a place where we belong." The room clapped as she blew out the flame. Then her phone buzzed. Everyone expected it to be Cole. Grace did too. She grabbed the phone without thinking, her heart foolishly hopeful, but the screen told a different story. A news article, sent by an old colleague. "Have you seen this?" Grace clicked. The link loaded slowly, too slowly, until the headline appeared. "New York power couple? developer Cole Miller spotted leaving Beverly Hills Hotel with PR executive Lana Hayes. Grace's breath vanished. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she scrolled down. Photo after photo showed Cole exiting a luxury hotel in California, Lana on his arm, laughing, touching him, acting like the wife Grace still was. The article speculated whether Cole and Lana were the next rising pair in real estate prestige. Grace's hands shook. Someone behind her whispered, "Is that?" She turned the phone face down, but it was too late. Hannah snatched it, scanned it, and froze. "He's unbelievable," she hissed. Grace, are you okay?" Grace didn't answer. She couldn't. Everything around her blurred. The walls, the balloons, the little gifts. It all felt suddenly small, fragile, foolish. The room smelled of sugar and melted wax, but all she could smell was betrayal, sharp and suffocating. Tasha gently squeezed her shoulder. "Sit down, honey." But Grace couldn't sit. She stood in the middle of her own baby shower, surrounded by people who cared for her, but feeling more humiliated than she had at the plaza. Because this time, she wasn't just a neglected wife. She was a pregnant woman publicly replaced, photographed, published, and praised. Her baby kicked hard, almost painfully, as if reacting to her spiraling emotions. She placed a trembling hand over her belly. "I'm okay," she whispered, even as hot tears filled her eyes. "I'm okay." But she wasn't. For the first time, she truly understood. Cole wasn't confused. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't lost. He had chosen Lana. Completely. Publicly. Proudly. The candle on the cake flickered in the corner. The faint scent of frosting filled the room. Someone quietly closed the laptop where Hannah had streamed family members in, sparing Grace from more eyes. She forced herself to breathe, to stand still, to keep from collapsing. Because even as her world crumbled, she could feel something else rising. Something she didn't yet recognize. Not anger, not despair. Something sharper, clearer, resolve. And soon she would discover a truth hidden in the shadows, one that would turn her pain into power. 3 days after the baby shower disaster, Grace sat at her kitchen table, legs tucked beneath her, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of a train rattling over tracks. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but the tears had dried into something heavier. Numbness. She forced herself to open her laptop. Work was the only thing that kept her from collapsing into the pain. She clicked into her email, expecting spreadsheets and routine updates. Instead, the first subject line made her sit up straight. "We won." It was from Adrian. Her heart raced. Hands trembling, she clicked. "Grace, the city has officially awarded us the waterfront redevelopment project. Your analysis, especially the risk flag you identified, played a substantial role in securing the approval. The board is impressed. I'm personally grateful. More details to follow." Grace covered her mouth with her hand, fighting a sudden, overwhelming rush of emotion. She had done this. She had made a difference. Not as Cole's wife, not as someone's burden, but as a professional in her own right. Before she could process the message, her phone pinged again. This time, it was a meeting invitation. Celebration dinner, mandatory attendance for all project leads, and beneath it, "Grace, I'd like you there as part of the core team. You earned this." Grace stared at the screen. Mandatory. Core team. Earned. Words she hadn't heard in years. She typed a response with shaking fingers. "I'll be there. Thank you." Hours later, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the simple black wrap dress Hannah had mailed weeks earlier. It wasn't glamorous, but it made her feel steady, contained. Her belly rounded beneath the fabric, reminding her of the life she was fighting for. Tasha knocked on the door with a small bag. "I brought makeup," she announced. "Nothing crazy. Just enough to show the world you're still here." Grace laughed softly. "You're an angel." "No," Tasha said, gently brushing blush across her cheeks. "You're the one doing the hard stuff." When she finished, she stepped back. "You look like someone who isn't scared anymore." Grace swallowed. Maybe I'm learning. Maybe she was. The restaurant Adrian chose overlooked the East River, all warm lighting and floor-to-ceiling windows. It wasn't Manhattan luxury, but it felt intentional, sophisticated without being intimidating. As Grace walked in, conversations quieted slightly, heads turning. She expected pity. Instead, she saw respect. Adrian stood to greet her, his expression softening the moment he saw her. "Grace, glad you made it." She smiled. "Thank you for inviting me." Thank you for giving me the strongest proposal we've submitted in 5 years." His words were simple, but the sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. He pulled out her chair, not to impress, not to claim territory, but out of old-fashioned courtesy. She couldn't remember the last time someone had done that for her. Dinner unfolded with warmth and laughter. Adrian's executives praised her insights, asked her about her methodology, and treated her as though she were one of them. Not a woman limping through heartbreak, not someone barely scraping by. At one point, Grace felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. She excused herself and stepped near the window, looking out at the water, the city lights shimmering on its surface. For a moment, she saw her reflection. Tired, yes, but stronger. More grounded. Alive in a way she hadn't felt in months. A quiet voice behind her said, "You're thinking too hard." She turned. Adrian stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression gentle. "Just taking it in," she murmured. "It's been a lot." He nodded. "I know what it feels like to be underestimated or forgotten. A beat. You didn't let it break you." Grace looked down at her belly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "And yet," Adrian said, "here you are." Something flickered between them, warm, subtle, unspoken. Not romance, recognition. Two people who knew what it meant to survive. Before she could respond, someone called Adrian back to the table. He nodded to her with a small smile. "Come join us. This is your night too." As Grace returned to her seat, a strange, powerful thought settled deep in her chest. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to win. And her rise was about to collide with Cole's downfall in a way he never saw coming. Grace hadn't dressed up in months, not since the night Cole humiliated her at the plaza. Since then, she'd lived in soft sweaters, loose t-shirts, and maternity leggings that stretched with her swelling belly. It wasn't vanity, it was survival. When your world collapses, you don't think about eyeliner or heels. You think about breathing. But tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't going to be a forgotten wife, or a financial burden, or a woman begging for scraps of kindness. Tonight, she was stepping into a room as someone with worth. Someone people needed. Someone Cole could no longer erase. The sun was setting outside her small Queens apartment, painting the cracked walls with warm streaks of orange. Grace stood in front of the mirror, staring at the dress hanging across her closet door. The same simple black wrap dress she'd worn once before, but somehow it felt different now. It wasn't a symbol of desperation anymore. It was a quiet declaration. "You can't break me." She smoothed a hand over her belly, whispering, "We're okay. We're going to be okay." A knock sounded at the door. Tasha let herself in before Grace could respond, carrying a small makeup bag and an energy that lit up the room. "I hope you didn't start without me. Tonight is important." Grace laughed softly. "You don't have to do all this." "Oh, please," Tasha said, waving a hand dismissively. "You're going to a dinner with New York executives. You can't show up looking like you're 2 nights into a Netflix meltdown." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like that?" "You did yesterday," Tasha teased. "But don't worry, I'm fixing it." She guided Grace to sit on a stool by the window, where the last sliver of daylight framed her face. With gentle strokes, Tasha applied foundation, blush, mascara. Nothing heavy, nothing flashy, just enough to bring out the softness in Grace's eyes and the glow in her skin. "You're beautiful," Tasha murmured. "You just forgot." Grace swallowed hard. "Thank you." When Tasha finished, she stepped back and crossed her arms. "Okay. Look." Grace turned toward the mirror. And the woman staring back wasn't the one who'd collapsed in a hospital hallway. She wasn't the woman who'd been shoved aside by her own husband. She wasn't the woman who'd cried over gossip articles and broken promises. She looked steady, calm, capable, pregnant, yes, but glowing with something new. Resolve, strength, hope. Grace slipped into the black dress carefully. It hugged her belly gently and tied at the waist, accentuating her shape instead of hiding it. For the first time, she didn't feel like pregnancy made her smaller or weaker. She felt powerful, like she was carrying her future in more ways than one. She borrowed Tasha's soft beige coat, slid into low heels, and picked up the one handbag she'd kept from her old life. A simple, elegant piece she'd bought with her own paycheck long before Cole's wealth overshadowed her identity. When she stepped outside, the cold winter air hit her cheeks and brought color to them. The city lights blinked awake around her. The subway rumbled in the distance, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel swallowed by the world. She felt like she belonged again. On the subway ride toward the restaurant, she caught several people glancing at her. Some at her belly, some at her dress, some with polite smiles. For once, she didn't shrink under the attention. She held the rail firmly and breathed steadily, letting the rhythm of the train ground her. Her baby shifted inside her, as if sensing her mixture of nerves and anticipation. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we're not going back to who we were." And she meant it, because tonight wasn't just a dinner. It was her re-entry into the world, a world that didn't know she was about to shake its foundations. And somewhere in Manhattan, a man who betrayed her was about to feel the first tremor of the storm she didn't even know she was becoming. The restaurant glowed with a soft amber light that made everything, from the polished silverware to the panoramic city view, feel warmer, richer, somehow more forgiving. Grace paused at the entrance, one hand resting instinctively on her belly as she took a steadying breath. She wasn't sure what she expected when she walked through those doors, but it certainly wasn't the hush that spread across the room the moment she stepped inside. People noticed her, not with pity, not with gossip, but with curiosity and something close to respect. Her heels clicked gently across the hardwood floor as the hostess led her toward a long table near the window. Several executives were already seated, laughing over cocktails and discussing early projections for the newly won project. But when they saw her approaching, the conversation softened. Adrian Blake rose first. He stood tall in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been sewn onto him. His expression shifted immediately, surprise first, then something warmer, something gentler, something that softened the hard lines of his face. "Grace," he said, his voice low but undeniably sincere. "I'm glad you came." She smiled, a small, honest smile she didn't have to force. "Thank you for having me." He pulled out her chair, an old-fashioned gesture but done without performance. And when she sat, his hand briefly touched the back of her chair, not out of possession, but protection. A quiet signal, "You're safe here." Across the table, a woman in a navy blazer leaned forward. "So you're the one who caught that buried clause. You saved us millions." Grace flushed. "I just noticed something off." "Noticed?" A man laughed. "You prevented a disaster. If that clause made it through, we'd be begging for mercy from the city for the next decade." Grace lowered her eyes, embarrassed, but also proud. Pride wasn't an emotion she'd felt in a long, long time. They ordered dinner. Nothing extravagant, but elegant enough to feel like a world far away from her cramped apartment in Queens. As plates arrived, conversation flowed easily around her. Grace listened, chimed in when asked, and found herself laughing at moments she didn't expect to. She didn't feel like a charity case or a temporary consultant. She felt like part of something. And every time her confidence wavered, she'd catch Adrian watching her, quietly, respectfully, like he was making sure she wasn't overwhelmed. At one point, he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "How are you holding up?" It wasn't small talk. He meant it. Grace met his eyes. "I'm okay. Better than I was." He nodded slowly. "Good. You deserve that." Her chest tightened, unexpected, warm. She looked back at the city lights to steady herself. After dessert, they all stood to mingle near the windows. Grace drifted toward the glass, watching the river below shimmer. Manhattan stretched endlessly before her, a skyline she used to look at with longing. Tonight it felt different. Not out of reach, not hostile, just possible. "You fit here, you know." She turned. Adrian now stood beside her, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed. "I don't know," she said quietly. "This feels like someone else's world." He shook his head. "This project wouldn't exist without your work. You earned your place long before tonight." Grace exhaled shakily. "I'm still trying to believe that." "That's okay," he replied. "Belief comes later. What matters is that it's true." A silence settled between them, comfortable, not tense. And then he said something that made her breath catch. "You're stronger than you think." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't sympathy. It was recognition. She felt her throat tighten. She wanted to thank him, but the words lodged in her chest. Before she could respond, a server approached. "Mr. Blake, your private room is ready if you'd like to continue discussions." Adrian nodded, then turned back to Grace with a softness she hadn't seen from him before. "You should join us, even if just for a bit." Grace hesitated. 1 heartbeat, 2. Then she nodded. And in that moment, stepping into that private room with Adrian's team, she didn't feel like the discarded wife of a powerful man. She felt like someone rising. And soon, her rise would cross paths with the man who threw her away, in a collision he never saw coming. The night was supposed to be routine for Cole. Another investor dinner, another chance to brag, another opportunity to show Lana off as if she were some coveted accessory. The restaurant he chose was upscale but familiar, a place where the staff greeted him by name and poured his favorite wine without being asked. He strutted in wearing a tailored suit, Lana on his arm, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She loved nights like this. Cameras, whispers, the safety of knowing she had Cole exactly where she wanted him. Cole loved them too. Nights where he could forget the messiness of Grace, her pregnancy, her emotional spirals. But tonight, the universe wasn't cooperating, because fate, silent, deliberate, merciless, had placed Grace and Adrian Blake under the same roof. Cole didn't notice it at first. He was too busy being loud, too busy ensuring everyone saw him, too busy relishing the envy he imagined in every pair of eyes. The maitre led him and Lana through the ambient-lit dining room toward their reserved area. Then the room shifted. Quietly, subtly. The way rooms do when something unexpected disrupts the air. Cole felt it before he saw it. A ripple of attention, a hush in conversation. He frowned, glancing around. Then he saw the source, Grace, his wife, his pregnant wife, sitting at a table near the windows, framed by city lights like she belonged there more than anyone else. Her black wrapped dress curved over her belly elegantly, her makeup soft, her posture poised. She looked healthier, glowing, stronger. But that wasn't what sent a pulse of ice through Cole's veins. It was the man sitting beside her, Adrian Blake, talking to her quietly, leaning in just enough to show familiarity but not enough to cross a line. His expression was warm, his attention focused. And Grace, his Grace, was laughing. Not polite laughter. Not nervous. Real laughter. Cole stopped walking. Lana bumped into his side. "What's wrong?" "Shut up," he whispered sharply. He couldn't breathe because everything he'd built, his arrogance, his excuses, his belief that Grace was broken without him, cracked in a single moment. Grace wasn't broken. She wasn't begging. She wasn't hiding in some dark corner of Queens. She was here, in public, with the one man Cole feared more than any rival in the industry. His throat tightened as he watched Adrian gesture for the waiter, making sure Grace received a non-alcoholic drink first. Thoughtful, attentive, protective. Cole had never done that. Not once. He forced his feet to move, dragging Lana behind him like dead weight. As he approached, snippets of conversation drifted to his ears. "Your analysis saved the bid. Sharp instincts. We're lucky to have you, lucky to have Grace." Cole's stomach lurched. He stepped closer, closer, heart pounding like a warning drum. Grace turned first, not startled, not shaken, just quietly aware. Her eyes met his, and Cole felt something he hadn't felt in years. Inferiority. Because she wasn't the woman he left. She wasn't small anymore. She wasn't scared. She was becoming someone he could no longer control. "Grace," he choked out, struggling to mask his panic. What are you doing here?" Before she could speak, Adrian turned, slowly, confidently, with a calm that sliced Cole open. "She's here as part of my team," Adrian said, "and she's done exceptional work." Cole blinked as if slapped. "Your team?" "Yes," Adrian replied. "She's one of the core analysts on the waterfront project." The project Cole lost. The project he blamed bad luck for. The project Grace had quietly, secretly helped Adrian win. Lana's eyes widened. A ripple of recognition flickered across her face. Grace remained silent, letting the truth speak for itself, letting Cole drown in it. Cole's chest tightened painfully. "She's my wife," he snapped, desperate to regain footing. Grace's voice cut through him, soft but razor-sharp. "Were you thinking about that in Beverly Hills?" Lana inhaled sharply. The executives nearby turned subtly, pretending not to listen. Cole's face burned. He'd been exposed, not by shouting, not by drama, by calm truth delivered by the woman he underestimated. And the night wasn't done with him, because this collision wasn't the final blow. It was merely the spark that would ignite his downfall. For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Silverware paused mid-air. Conversations dimmed into murmurs. Even the soft jazz playing overhead thinned into background static. It was as if Manhattan itself leaned in to witness the moment Cole Miller's world slipped out of his hands. Cole stood frozen, staring at Grace across the table, staring at the woman he'd dismissed, pushed aside, and replaced, now sitting tall and steady beside the one man he'd spent years trying to outrun. His pulse hammered against his ribs, fury boiling in his chest. Adrian rested one arm casually against the back of Grace's chair, not touching her, not staking a claim, just standing near her in a way that screamed quiet confidence. It was effortless. Natural. Dangerous. Cole couldn't compete with effortless, and he knew it. "Grace," Cole said again, voice cracking with disbelief. "You came here with him?" Grace didn't flinch. "I came here with my team." "My team?" Cole spat, his voice rising. "You're working with my rival behind my back?" Adrian's tone dropped into calm firmness. "Your personal issues aren't appropriate for this setting." That was all it took. Cole's restraint snapped like dry wood. He stepped forward, ignoring Lana tugging nervously at his sleeve. "Don't lecture me, Blake. She's my wife. She doesn't get to embarrass me like this." Grace inhaled sharply. "Embarrass you?" Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with a strength sharpened by months of grieving and rebuilding. "You left me," she said quietly. "You pushed me out of our home. You froze our accounts. You humiliated me at the plaza, and I'm supposed to protect your ego?" A stunned silence rippled through the room. Someone at a nearby table whispered, "Isn't she pregnant?" Cole's face flushed scarlet. "Grace, stop making a scene." "You made the scene," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, but loud enough to hit every ear. "I'm just telling the truth." Lana's eyes darted around, panic rising. She could feel the shift in the room, public sympathy turning sharply away from Cole. "Let's just leave," Lana hissed under her breath. "Cole, come on." But rage had already swallowed him. "You don't get to sit here like some victim," Cole snapped at Grace. "You ran off to my enemy the moment things got hard." Grace's eyes filled with a quiet fire. "I didn't run off. I survived, alone, while you were in Beverly Hills holding someone else's hand." A few diners gasped. Phones lifted discreetly. Lana paled. "Cole, people are filming." He whipped toward her. "Because of her? She's doing this." "No," Adrian said, stepping fully between them now, expression calm but dark with warning. "She's done nothing but mind her business. You're the one causing a scene." Cole lunged forward, finger raised. "Stay out of this, Blake." Adrian didn't move. Or what? Grace felt her breath catch. She'd never seen anyone stand between her and Cole before. Never seen anyone tell Cole no. Never seen Cole look so small. When Cole spoke again, his voice cracked under the weight of his unraveling ego. "She's carrying my child," he shouted. "You think you can just swoop in and—" Grace cut him off, steady and sharp. "You don't get to claim what you abandoned." The room fell deadly silent. Cole staggered back as if struck. Lana covered her mouth. Every pair of eyes in the restaurant locked onto the man who had just publicly revealed everything ugly about himself. Managers approached cautiously. "Sir," one said, "we need you to calm down or leave." Cole's jaw clenched. "I am not." "Cole," Lana hissed, voice trembling, "stop. You're ruining everything." His chest heaved. His nostrils flared. He looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to validate him. No one did. Not one person. Because in that moment, Grace wasn't the weak one. She wasn't the emotional one. She wasn't the burden. She was the truth. And Cole was the man exposed by it. He stumbled backward, humiliated, unraveling, losing the image he clung to so desperately. He had no idea this was only the beginning, because after tonight, the whole city would know who he really was. And the consequences he feared most were already on their way. Cole should have walked out of the restaurant quietly. He should have taken Lana's trembling hand, swallowed his pride, and escaped before more eyes turned in his direction. But pride was the only thing he had left, and it was crumbling fast. He spun back toward Grace and Adrian, desperation clawing at his voice. "You're doing this to punish me," he accused, "to ruin me." Grace didn't stand. She didn't shout. She didn't match his chaos. She simply looked tired. Tired of being blamed. Tired of being erased. "All I've done," she said softly, "is survive what you put me through." Her calmness poured gasoline on his rage. Cole slammed his hand against the edge of the table. Glasses rattled. Several diners recoiled. A waiter flinched so hard he nearly dropped a tray. Lana grabbed his arm. "Cole, you're scaring people." But he jerked away violently. "Don't touch me." A hush fell over the entire dining room. Adrian stepped forward. "This ends now." Cole laughed, a short, broken bark. You think you're a hero? You think she wants you? Adrian didn't take the bait. What she wants is dignity, something you haven't given her in a long time. Gasps drifted through the restaurant. Grace looked down, blinking hard. She hated scenes. She hated being watched. She hated that her private heartbreak was being dissected under chandeliers and exposed in real time to strangers with half-raised phones. But she also knew something crucial. This wasn't her shame to carry anymore. Cole pushed past Adrian, pointing at Grace with a shaking finger. You think working for him makes you better than me? You think some spreadsheets make you important? No, Grace said quietly. Respect makes me important. And I never needed your permission to have value. That line, small, simple, shattered something inside Cole. Respect? He spat. You want respect? You couldn't even keep our home together. You were always too much, too emotional, too needy, and I was sick of carrying you. I'm the one who let you stay pregnant. I'm the one who paid your bills. You're nothing without me. A collective gasp rippled across the room. A couple near the bar stood up and moved away. A woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Did he just say that?" Phones lifted higher. Lana paled. "Cole, stop. Please stop." But he was past stopping. "This whole poor abandoned wife act? It's fake," he yelled. "She destroyed our marriage long before Lana showed up. She's unstable. She's always been unstable. She twists things, lies." Adrian's voice cut through his rant like a blade. "Enough." Cole wheeled toward him. "Don't tell me. I said enough." Adrian's tone wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it held a steel edge that silenced half the room. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folder, and placed it calmly on the table. "This," Adrian said, "is what unstable looks like." Cole froze. Adrian continued, voice steady. "My team completed a private investigation yesterday after hearing rumors about Grace leaking information, and we discovered something very interesting." Grace's breath caught. She didn't know about this part. "Cole," Adrian said, "these are bank statements showing transfers from your company to a former employee, the same employee who falsely accused Grace of misconduct." Cole's face drained of color. "And here," Adrian added, sliding out a document, "is a time-stamped message from that employee, bragging about being paid by you to smear your wife's reputation." Grace's eyes widened. She felt her chest tighten. Her world tilted, not from fear, but from vindication so sharp it almost hurt. The murmurs in the restaurant swelled. A man whispered, "He framed his pregnant wife?" Another muttered, "What kind of person does that?" Lana stumbled back a step, horrified. "Cole, tell me this isn't real." Cole's mouth opened, closed, opened again, no sound coming out. His mind scrambled, searching for a lie big enough to bury the truth, but nothing came. His mask, perfectly crafted over years, finally cracked. Managers arrived with security. "Sir, you need to leave." Cole staggered backward, eyes darting desperately between Grace, Adrian, and the crowd filming him. "Grace," he whispered, voice shaking, "please, don't do this. Don't let them." She looked at him with quiet, exhausted clarity. "I didn't do this, Cole. You did." He reached out, but she didn't move. She didn't have to. Security guided him toward the entrance. Lana followed, not touching him, not defending him, not whispering comfort, only watching the empire she thought she latched onto crumble in real time. The glass doors closed behind them. Silence filled the room. For the first time in months, Grace breathed without pain. Her truth was out. Her dignity restored. Her abuser exposed. But her fight wasn't over, because the next battle would take place not in a restaurant, but in a courtroom, where everything she'd fought for would be put to the ultimate test. The fallout from the restaurant incident spread across Manhattan faster than a winter storm. By morning, videos had gone viral on social media. Clips of Cole shouting, accusing, humiliating his pregnant wife, and the moment Adrian exposed the incriminating documents. News outlets twisted their headlines into sharp, gleaming blades. Developer Cole Miller melts down in public. Pregnant wife reveals shocking mistreatment. Rival CEO steps in during chaotic confrontation. Grace didn't watch the broadcasts. She didn't read the comments. She simply sat in her small Queens apartment with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, one hand resting on her belly, taking slow breaths as the city finally saw the truth. By noon, her phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from lawyers, messages from old friends apologizing for believing Cole's lies, even a voicemail from Cole's own mother, voice shaking with shame. But the message she'd been waiting for came quietly. without drama. It was from Adrian. "You're going to need legal protection. I've arranged for the best family law attorney in the city. She'll contact you within the hour." Grace stared at the message, tears filling her eyes. Not from sadness, from relief, from gratitude, from the realization that someone finally had her back. 2 weeks later, Grace walked into the Manhattan Family Court building. Chin lifted, steps steady, belly full and round beneath her dress. She wasn't alone. Her attorney, an older woman named Valerie with sharp eyes and a reputation for never losing, walked beside her. Outside the courtroom, reporters snapped photos, shouting questions. Grace kept her head high, ignoring them all. Inside, Cole waited. He looked nothing like the polished, arrogant man she'd once married. His suit hung loose. His eyes were bloodshot. Stress carved deep lines across his face. Lena wasn't with him. She'd disappeared from his life the moment the scandal hit, scrubbing her social media clean, removing photos, pretending she'd never touched him. When Cole saw Grace, something inside him cracked. "Grace," he whispered, standing. "I never meant for things to go this far." She sat without responding. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Valerie moved like a storm, calm, methodical, devastating. She presented evidence of financial neglect, emotional abuse, the falsified accusations, the frozen accounts, the abandonment during medical emergencies, and the publicly documented humiliation. Cole tried to defend himself. "I was stressed. I didn't know the accusations were false. She misunderstood. I never wanted her to suffer." But every excuse fell apart under the weight of the truth. Grace didn't speak until the judge finally turned to her. "Mrs. Miller," he said gently, "do you wish to address the court?" She rose slowly, one hand stabilizing her belly. The courtroom quieted. "I'm not here to punish him," Grace said softly. "I'm here to protect my child. And myself. I gave everything I had to our marriage. He chose someone else. He chose himself. I won't let my baby grow up in the shadow of that." Her voice didn't tremble. Her truth landed like a final, decisive blow. The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Please be seated." Half an hour later, he delivered the ruling. Grace would retain full custody. Cole would have supervised visitation only. Financial restitution would be ordered for the months he deprived her of support. The joint accounts would be restored, under Grace's exclusive control until the baby turned 18. And the marriage dissolved, effective immediately. Grace inhaled shakily. It was over. Cole buried his face in his hands. "Grace, please, don't do this." She rose, gathering her coat. "I didn't do this, Cole. You did." She walked out of the courtroom as flashbulbs flared behind her, not shrinking, not crying, not apologizing. She walked out free. Outside, Adrian waited by the steps, hands tucked in his coat pockets, eyes softening when he saw her. "How did it go?" he asked gently. Grace released a breath she felt she'd been holding for an entire year. "It's done," Adrian nodded. "Good. You deserve justice." They stood quietly for a moment, snow starting to fall around them. Then he offered his arm, not forcefully, not expectantly, just a gesture of support. She took it, not as a damsel in distress, not as a woman seeking rescue, but as someone stepping into a new life, one she had built with her own strength. As they walked down the courthouse steps, Grace felt her baby shift softly inside her, like a tiny reminder. "You did it, Mom. We made it." And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. Grace Miller was no longer the abandoned wife. She was the woman who rose from ashes and rebuilt her life with truth, dignity, and a heart ready to receive whatever goodness came next. And that's how Grace's story comes to an end. But maybe not really. Because if you're still here, still listening, still breathing through every moment with her, then something in this journey has touched your heart in a way words can't fully explain. Maybe it reminded you of your own pain. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Or maybe, just maybe, it whispered to you what Marcus Aurelius once wrote. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Grace lost almost everything, yet she didn't lose herself. She learned that respect, dignity, and peace aren't gifts others give us. They're choices we make, one day at a time. Healing isn't loud, it's steady, it's real, and it belongs to anyone brave enough to walk away from what breaks them. So if her story stayed with you, let it guide you. Let it remind you that you too deserve better. You too can rebuild. You too can begin again. And if you felt even the smallest spark of strength tonight, give this video a like, Share it with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe. Because somewhere out there is another story waiting to heal you. Just a little more.